And Dilla was definitely one of those where it was just like, yo, forever and a day, no matter what we talk about with music and we talk about hip hop, he's got to be spoken about in terms of our production.
And he started in 95. Tip played me a beat tape. And I was like, yo, for real? You know, like, I was like, damn, this dude's gonna put me out of a job.
People would be crazy for his next beat CD because you ain't know what you was gonna hear. You had Slum Village, we was trying to get beats. Then you had Q-Tip, Buster, you had De La Soul, and people was attacking this beat CD like dogs. It would be gone that quick, like just like that.
Dilla, every time, it's like that kick just sat so perfectly. And like his swings, his shuffles on his beats, his snare choices, the way he sample shit, it was just like, it sounded like, felt like drugs. I mean, his music just sounded like good pussy.
The big deal is he invented some shit that wasn't around before, and people are still using to this day, and that's big.
When I make my music, you know what I'm saying, I want people to feel what I feel. I want them to feel that energy whatever it was. Yeah, that's all it is. Because I make it straight from the heart. So it's like, to be taken for anything else is crazy to me. When people get upset, you know, people take, you know, just, you know.
Dilla always was music. You know, I thought that maybe as he got older it would change. I intervened and tried to establish that because mothers worry about what are you going to do when you get older. And you see people that start out singing and they don't ever make it to the big time. So you don't want that. You want something like definite that they can put a career behind or survive in the world, you know. And music's not always for everybody. Everybody doesn't get out the gate. So I didn't want that, you know. And so I tried to push him in other ways. But at 2 years old, he spun records right downtown here in Harmony Park. And so it was like his way to get out, get fresh air. His dad worked at Ford Motor Company, Highland Park. And, you know, he was there and until he, you know, left Ford and retired there after 40 years. But Dilla had to go outside. We had a restaurant inside the Milner Hotel, which is now, I think, the Ashley or something like that. Okay, condo. But our restaurant is still part of that hotel that we had. We did the Milner Grill after a while. And it was rough, you know, raising toddlers and still having a restaurant, working from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., you know, every day, and still going home and cooking a regular family meal was kind of like rough. However, Dilla had to have outdoors, you know. You couldn't just like keep a kid locked up in an apartment with babysitters while you know, running a restaurant. So his good behavior meant that he could go to the park. People used to go to Harmony Park, sit there right around the corner from the music hall. It was a little island there with a little step down, you know, little part, and you could see each other and on different like little benches or just the concrete. People eat lunch and just talk and have a seat. And Dilla started spinning records. Well, he was a little 2-year-old. He wore his cap to match his sunglasses, to, you know, and match his jacket, all because he cared about what he dressed like then. Even as a 2-year-old, he wanted to look like a little man. So we bought a little man jacket, and I was more than happy to do that and get him ready for, you know, when his dad would come home. I'd still be in the restaurant, but his dad would come home from Ford's, and he'd take him down to Harmony Park to spin records. 45s on his little arm, to stick his arm through there, it was that small, and have his Fisher Price, you know, and Fisher Price is ready with the batteries and everything, and he'd go to Harmony Park, and they spent hours spinning records. And he wasn't the kind that spun children's records. He spun Motown, and even though he couldn't read yet at 2, he knew the records that people were asking. Well, you have. On my chance to be there with him, like on Saturdays when the restaurant would close, I either had someone to step in and I could get a little breath of air. They would ask for certain artists, and I'm looking at the people, and I don't question it, but I'm like, why would they ask him that? Because he's not reading the labels, but he knew what they wanted many times. So I didn't say anything because I wouldn't even know. I didn't know all the artists. But for some reason, maybe they had been asking for certain songs at different times that I wasn't there. So I didn't say anything, and they'd be just as happy. And I think he watched the expressions on people's faces when they got the music played that they requested. And I think he began to learn how they would feel. And he wanted to give more of that. And it was something that I guess built up the things that he had inside of him. At that time, I thought it was just something, a passing fancy. But at Christmas time, and we'd ask every year, what do you want for Christmas? And it never changed. I want another record player. I want a bigger record player. And when he got about 6 or 7, he wanted a turntable. And then by the time he was 9, he wanted 2 turntables. And then by the time he got 11, he wanted a beat machine. And, it was very, very low-key and small. But at that time, he had learned how to 2-track on cassette tape, because his dad put 5 tracks on a cassette tape, just doing different parts, as he was an a cappella singer with a jazz group here in the city for a long time. So he learned techniques from his dad, and he just did different things in his head with him. He had like a library in his head, and he could hear a tune and imagine what something else that he had stored in his head would sound like, infusing that. And this was part of his creativity. And he was not afraid to test it beyond what other people did. He had no ceiling. So that was one thing that brought his sound. And I think most people that are Dilla fans know his sound. And people try to mimic it, but they know straight out if it's a Dilla track. Because I didn't realize it at first myself, but you definitely can tell his sound from others. And but it came up as a fusion of different types of music he was introduced to in his youth. He sang in church in the choir. He was, an acolyte and carried the thing to cross. All that kind of stuff in his upbringing. So he had the full spectrum of music, but each is part of the other. And I think he understood that you only got so many notes. It's what you do with them and how you hear them, when you play. And he played instruments. The first instrument he learned to play was the piano, and then he wanted drums. By the time he got to school, now he was doing piano at 5. But when he went to school, Atkinson Elementary School, which is now Legacy, I believe, charter school, they introduced him to the violin. And of course, he played that. And his hunger for music of all kind, he would do. By the time he got to junior high, he wanted to play drums because they had a full spectrum at Farwell, but there was no drum equipment for him. And Miss McConnell, his music teacher, said, well, James, if you will play for me and play the cello, which no one wanted. He's small in stature. So one thing, it wasn't the instrument of choice for many students. They weren't looking that direction. And she said, if you play that for me this year, she said, I promise you I'll let you do drums next year. So he was like sold. He was like, well, okay, because that's what he wanted to do. And he picked up the cello. But the problem we had was it took longer for him to get home from school because he would cut through alleys to get home. He didn't want anybody to see him carrying the cello because he had to take it home to practice. And I would wonder, what is wrong? Because my mind is like, what's the problem? And we caught him driving. His dad was on once, and we were trying to find out what happened and where was he okay? And nobody knew where he was at. Everybody else was home. And he was cutting through alleyways because he didn't want anybody to see him carrying a cello home. But he had mastered it in weeks. So after a couple of months, he was playing in high school graduations at Osborne and everything. And I went to see him at a concert at, the one at Kettering, okay, on Van Dyke, yes. And he loved the sound, but he didn't want to be caught with it. It wasn't the cool thing to do. Like, it wasn't cool, Mom, to tell people what he got on his report card. All 3 of my kids told me, said, please don't ask us to stand up in church when they say stand up for your report cards because it's just not cool. And so I had to suppress myself because I was proud, but they're like, it's not cool, Ma, it's not cool,
I get that. I'm a trombone player, so I understand fully, Not the coolest instrument to walk around.
Wasn't. No, you don't want anybody to know because, they already think he's a nerdy boy, and he's small in stature and he's carrying this big cello and he's all over the place and doing stuff. But he was introverted, so he didn't have that strength of character yet, It was all inside.
I had heard about Dilla, heard he had crazy beats. So we met, we went to his house. He had a little bitty drum machine, but their beats was crazy. And that's when we formed Slum Village.
He was skipping school to come home to prepare for sessions at Amp Fiddler's for musicians that were coming in for studio work. Amp had showed him how to do that, and he was engineering for sessions. And I was like, I'm thinking that he's going to learn something and that he's going to be at school the next day. And I confronted him. He said, well, Ma, I just have to suffer the consequences because it's going to be music. And I'm like, and I'm standing there and I'm in shock that he said it. He's standing face to face with me. And I'm like, even if I beat him down, he's still going to do this, because I was the one that said, well, I would do the spanking in the house. His dad would just, and sometimes they tell me, I'd rather you hit us. And then, than to hear him a month later still talking about it.
I was the musicians who probably been funkadelic, and I had my own studio downstairs. And these kids came to my house and asked me if I could help get the music done. And I was like, so what's up? What y'all want to do? I mean, I'm down for helping y'all to make it happen if you got skills. If you don't have skills, don't waste my time. And that's when I heard Dilla.
Do you remember what you thought of what he was putting together?
The audio quality is horrible, but the skill set behind it and the ear, amazing. He already knew what he wanted. He just needed tools. I'll show Dilla the MPC. This is how you use it. I said, the sky is the limit what you can do with the shit. It's just what you can imagine it. He did it all with that day.
And Questlove and Pino Palladino when they're creating D'Angelo's classic album, Voodoo. So this is in the late 1990s, and they're hearing Dilla's beats and they're trying to emulate it as musicians. So what D'Angelo and Pino are doing are playing a little behind the beat, meaning a little looser, like the notes come to after you think they're supposed to come. And so they're playing a little behind the beat, so Questlove slows down with them. And D'Angelo says, no, don't do that. You stay ahead of us because you can't play behind something that keeps falling back with you. So he said, Amir, take your headphones off. So Amir had to play without his headphones so he couldn't hear his bandmates. So he would stay straight and D'Angelo and Pino could swing it. Mm-hmm. That's how a band of musicians works together to emulate this machine feel. So a lot of people say that Dilla humanized his drum machine, and I actually feel like Dilla used his drum machine to make a kind of rhythm that no human had ever made before. And the fun part of it is watching the traditional musicians trying to get at that time feel.
Yeah.
I didn't actually realize even the depth of his rhythmic sabotage until I was mixing the album 6 months later and listening to the song Don't Say a Word, the song that became Don't Say a Word over and over again. And like, something wrong with them hi-hats? What's going on with those hi-hats? Something felt warped. And I was so weirded out by it that I actually took the file and I loaded it into my digital audio workstation, which was at the time Digital Performer. I don't think anybody uses that anymore.
I know what it is, but yeah, no one uses it anymore.
So I put it in and I put the waveform at 0 and lined up the hi-hats with the grid, with the tempo. And the hi-hats were perfectly aligned. I'm like, well, why do they sound swung if they're perfectly aligned with the grid? And that's when I saw it. I saw the rushed snare. He was rushing the snare. He was putting the snare a little bit too early. And I'm like, why is he doing that? Like, oh, so the snare coming early makes the hi-hat sound swung, but they're not? That was my first experience of what I now call Dilla time. We didn't have a word for it then. Yeah. It was just fucked up. It was just like, what? And then you start to hear this rhythm, right? That rush snare, especially later on. I think it was either the next summer you hear Music Soul Child his first single, Just Friends. And then you hear The Blast, High Tech and Talib Kweli. All of these programmers are now starting to use these rhythms. And then, of course, when D'Angelo's album comes out, it's the first time we're hearing traditional musicians use those rhythms. So it was a slow, I'm too slow. I was too slow to be a great A&R person for sure. You know, too slow to be a good journalist back then, and slow to sort of realize what was happening in those, in those beats. So I am going to tell you in as simple language as I can what he did, all right? And it's big. I'm going to take you all the way back to Europe, right? European music is all straight. It's all even beats. Time is counted evenly in European music. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. Opera, symphonies, all that stuff. That's straight time. In America, in the 20th century, we evolved something called swing time, which is uneven beats, which sounds like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And that is a retention of African the genius of African Americans here on the North American continent, right? So straight time and swing time. We've had them both in our popular music, in jazz, in rock, in hip hop, right? Even in this famous song, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, right? There's a point in the song where they're doing this little opera thing. No. That's straight time. And then after he sings, Beelzebub has the devil put aside for me, then it goes into this junk, da-dun. That's swing. So you go from straight to swing in one song. That's how you know the difference between straight and swung. But in 1998, in a basement in Detroit, on an MPC drum machine, James Yancey found a way to collide straight rhythms and swung rhythms at the same time and put them in conflict with each other. And that's what gives you that drunken, jerking, loping, limping kind of JD feel. It first starts to come out on this beat tape that people now, it's on YouTube, people call it Another Batch. You can search for it. J Dilla, Another Batch. But it really comes out on Fantastic Volume 2 by Slum Village. That time feel, and then you will hear it on Commons like Water Chocolate, 2000, and then actual traditional musicians start to imitate what he did on the drum machine. So you hear D'Angelo and Questlove on Voodoo trying to replicate that machine conflict with real instruments. And it's mind-blowing. Within a few years, you've got, like I said, Music Soul Child, Jill Scott, Floetic, Michael Jackson, Dark Child, Brandy, everybody's doing that limping time feel. And I guess for me, as a professor, as a historian, looking back on it, I was starting to see the history being written without him in it, or him just being a footnote. And I said, you know what? His achievements have not been properly framed. They need a name, and I'm going to name it. I'm going to put it right here and say, no, it's actually it's a new time feel, which is an innovation of 100-year proportions.
He had a Pro Tools studio done. MCA that was part of the deal that he had with MCA. And he never used it to its full capacity of which it was built. And Mike Chevaria installed that studio for him. And he told Mike not to do it at its full capacity. He wanted to leave a space for his own mind to infiltrate and to add. He didn't want it given, because we got something greater here. Sometimes we don't use both sides of our mind now. And man hasn't created the all in all, so you have to challenge yourself. And I think that's what that was about. He wanted to make sure he was going to be creative to it, and he never was satisfied, because even when he finished a project, he would question, but can it be better? some things he put back, and he said, I'm going to come back to that, because it was something that he wasn't like, it can't get any better, you know. He was always, you know, and it was, for him, it was never about the money or prestige, and he didn't care, and Grammys and things like that. He didn't care. But what it meant was, do they feel it? Do they like it?
You know what was crazy is Dilla used the MPC 3000. Anybody that knows about these machines, the MPC 3000 didn't have a waveform on it. It was numbers. Like right now, you can pull up a sample and look at the waveform and know where you want to cut it. These were numbers. He was cutting this with his ears, not his eye.
He was very giving. He would help anyone. He would help anyone, should I say, that was sure that music was what they wanted to do. He had no patience for people that hum-hawed about things or wasn't sure if you weren't dedicated, or if he gave you time to be at the house to work and you were late, that would be your last time coming to the house. And he let you know before you leave that, well, you're not serious. I don't have time for this. I'm sorry. And that would be it. I don't care how close you were a friend, you weren't ready. And he had no patience. He was like a scientist. It had to be on point. It had to be right. He had no time for nonsense.
Dilla was the one that showed me, like, okay, I studied reggae where the kick and the snare come on the 2 and the 4.
Right.
Right? So it's
Exactly.
right? He would do beats where there's no kick on the 1.
Exactly.
It sounds simple, but it's mind-blowing when you first hear it.
Yep.
Where it's just like, oh, nah, because that's the first thing I'm gonna do when I'm just, I'll just start with the kick and the snare. But I'm like, no, he started with the sample and was like, no, don't put no kick on the 1.
Right.
Because another thing that he would do, which was he was notorious for, he would never start his beats just like press start on the beat machine, right? It was always pre-running and then it would kind of fade up. Or
Right. You never knew where the one. He never knew where the one was, because it would just cut fade in and fade out. And you'd be like, "What?" I mean, a lot of them be so quick. You'd be just like, "What the hell was that?" And you would make up your own one. And by the time you hear the real song, you realize the one was something else. And you know,
so it opens your mind to be like, "Yo, okay, all these rules I made for myself." He's breaking all of them, but it sounds really good.
Right.
Common and I were dating at the time, and he was so shy. So I would always play this trick on him. Whenever Common would leave the room, I would walk up to him real slow and seductively and be like, now we're finally alone. You are such a sexy guy. He'd be like, and Common would come in and I would, pretend like I wasn't doing it. And Common knew I was doing it. He would say, don't do that, E. Don't do him like that. Don't do that, man, like that. But he was real shy. It was funny to me. It tickled me to do that to him. But he was also a very, very sweet and humble person. Generous and giving. Of course, as an artist, when he wants his own space, he wants his own space. His head space, and you have to kind of give him that.
He didn't stress. Even when I would say something about things that I thought might be wrong, he said, well, don't worry about it, lady. It's a time for everything. And he would always tell me that, and I'd be angry sometimes. But he said, don't worry about it. It's a time for everything. So he had a calm about him. He never got too upset. But if he did get very upset, then he just closed the doors. Nobody was coming downstairs. He put on his headphones and he's in another land, because he breathed music.
The thing about Dilla is that he was always changing. And that can be really frustrating, especially to people like me and Guy who are in the business side of things, who are fighting for artist success. And when they finally have a sound and an image and a following, then they want to change it up. What is wrong with you, right? There's a thing about, Derek Dudley, great manager of Common, Common's he has his first big hit. He's put out, this is his 4th album, and he finally has a gold record. What does Common want to do? Electric Circus. And Derek is the only one looking at no. I had no shots for any of that, but I think he would have kept evolving. I really do. I think he might have actually gone into the jazz world, because he had just done his first remix for Blue Note. And it was amazing. It was like a reinterpretation, reharmonization of Jack McDuff's
Obligato.
I was noticing like every 4 months, he was completely changing. Like complete, like there's errors of Dilla.
In different chambers.
Yeah, or just like this batch is all break beats. You know what I mean? Like traditional break beats, and I'm just chopping them in ways that people never thought of before, right? Then this batch is all programmed drums with me playing Moogs.
Right.
And then this batch is me getting into my prog rock bag.
Right.
And then this batch, like every couple months, it was always completely different. And the feels and the vibes was different. So it was just like, for me, he was I don't know, I've said this so many times, and I don't think people really understand what I mean. He was the Michael Jordan of beat making, because he took, like Michael Jordan took what everybody in the NBA did before him, from Dr. J to Larry Bird to Magic Johnson to whoever you name before him, and put it all together and made it something better than what they were individually.
Yeah.
And when I say he, I'm talking about Dilla, showed a mastery of every single style that we've ever seen.
One time we went to the studio where Pharrell was working, and I took me and JD went in there. As soon as Dilla walked in, Pharrell got down on his knees and started like bowing show, like this is the man. I mean, he was doing it like just paying homage. He wasn't like, he was so serious, but he was serious. And he was like, just giving respect to Dilla. Like, you don't understand, all these producers, from watching Questlove to Pharrell to D'Angelo, you know, they all revered JD as the God. James Poyser, who worked a lot with us and is a producer in his own right, pianist, they all would be like the God. That's the God. So to have the God as my roommate was, man, I felt like I was up in everybody, like, because people wanted to know what Dilla was doing and what is he coming up with next. And other artists was like looking for Dilla beats, and I had access to that. But I also got to just know him as a friend, and even knows a vulnerable time for him because he was sick, so he wasn't always like being able in his superpower of J Dilla. And that was something that was dear to me, because man, it was times where we just didn't know when he was going to transition, so it was tough.
He still is great because he's been able to be real with himself, you know, and real with the situations around him. And I think in our final days of Dilla and hearing him talk, you know, we all felt that. We all felt that interview on that tape. We felt that. And it was true. It was honest, man. And he's the greatest, man. Yo, he brought something to hip hop. And that's the thing about this. Like, I get upset when I see cats constantly just taking from it. Taking, and give nothing back. Yo, he gave something to hip hop in a major way, you know, and he definitely helped carry De La Soul past the tradition of, by the time you make your third album, your career is going to be over. Well, he helped us beat the odds.